It's one of those cases where you're going, what? Where's everything?
What you said is true. If somebody goes to prison for any amount of time, it severely alters the trajectory of their life.
He is a nice, cool cat. He has a lot of girlfriends. They were all involved. They all helped chip in, and he's part of the community.
He's a lovable guy. That's why he had all the girlfriends, a teddy bear.
Everyone likes him. The prosecutor kept calling the Malibu a Camaro. And me and Corinne are looking at each other going like, what? Why does he keep saying it's definitely not a Camaro? You know, asked him a couple questions. Then he goes, can I plead the fifth? I'm like, yeah, sure.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Well, and you can see the jurors is kind of like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then what do? They try to fingerprint the car. Do they check it for DNA? Do they get any sort of gunshot residue off the car? No, they just have a guy on there who tried to pull a print off the passenger window, and that was it. They had nothing even showing our client was in the car.
It was interesting when we were doing cross and we were asking him questions. He was very forthright and almost timid, admitting that, yeah, I guess you're right. I guess we didn't look into that, or we didn't follow up on that, or yeah, you're right. I guess, that is a possibility.
They can hold people up to 120 days on a murder before they even charge them.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy. That is unconstitutional.
Whoa.
That's why Louisiana has the highest incarceration rate in the world, more than China, more than Russia.
Yeah, you could hear a pin drop in the room for sure. I mean, she was our biggest question mark of not sure how she was going to answer, because when we reviewed the interview that she did with the police, there was some contradictive information and we didn't know which story she was going to tell, which route she was going to go from there.
And so we really bet all of our chips on this one, and it worked out, but it was nerve-wracking.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Iron Gavel. I'm Chris Washington, a personal injury and criminal defense attorney with over 17 years of courtroom experience. Bi-weekly, we bring you gripping true stories of justice, strategy, and humanity from inside the courtroom. Today's story is one of high stakes, sharp tactics, and a verdict that changed a life. Let's dive in. Today's guest is attorney Edward Johnson and his paralegal, who's a freelance paralegal, Corinne, say your last name for me.
Swintoski.
All right, I didn't want to butcher it, so thank you for that. Their client was facing a murder charge, even though there was no direct evidence suggesting he committed the crime. But before we unpack the courtroom drama, let's get to know the people behind this fight and victory. So, Edward, what inspired you to be a criminal defense attorney?
Chris, thanks for having me on the show. I have a pretty well-documented background. I thought I would save some money on legal fees if I just went to law school and represented myself. But, the pursuit of justice, and everyone gets in trouble. Nobody's perfect. And the important thing for me is just to have that basis and have someone's back. And the government oversteps, and we've seen what's happened with political candidates and all the way up to, somebody in your family who makes a mistake. They all need help. And it's nice to be there for people.
How about you, Corinne? You're a freelance paralegal. What
Yes, sir.
drove you to be a part of all this madness us lawyers choose to be a part of?
Well, I have quite a versatile background in the criminal legal system. I hopped around from being a probation officer to criminal court clerk to finally paralegal. And I realized that I love being an advocate. I love being zealous, and I couldn't really do that in the probation or court clerk realm. And personally, I saw various family members of mine, as well as friends, go through the system, and it was just a revolving door. They weren't getting the help they needed, and that was something that I wanted to be a part of to try to change that, ensure people's rights were upheld, and to make sure that it wasn't just a revolving door for them and they got the help that they needed. So I'm happy to assist criminal defense attorneys with this work and continue to be an advocate for these client base.
Okay, great. I think a lot of people in our society imagine that it's never going to happen to them. Like, I'm never going to be in trouble. And the reality is sometimes innocent people end up in trouble more often than the public really wants to accept. And even if somebody's guilty, a lot of times our job is not necessarily get out of jail free card, but what's a fair punishment for that? Look, we just got to keep fighting. I want to know a little bit about you guys' background. and how that shaped your views of our justice system. I know, Edward, you said something interesting. I don't know how much you want to elaborate on it, but look, you wouldn't be the first lawyer who's chose to be a lawyer based on personal experience. So what can you share with us about that?
Well, I grew up with my whole extended family. They're all lawyers. They don't do criminal laws much, but they're all over the United States. And I have 27 cousins on one side of my family. They're all going through law school or they're lawyers now. And it just really, if you weren't a lawyer, you couldn't really sit at the big boy table at Thanksgiving. But, a lot of things have happened to me, and I've seen a lot of people get in trouble. Things happen, and it didn't make sense. And once you start peeling back the layers, you really get to learn about how important it is to have a proper advocate. And there's one thing that I learned early on too, just being a lawyer, being realistic, is we're all just one act away from being in the defendant chair. If you have a lawyer that doesn't feel that way and feels above it, I think you should get another lawyer, because everyone makes mistakes and things happen. You can get in trouble, and you're one mistake from being charged for anything.
That's true. I tell people all the time, especially lawyers, young lawyers I mentor, you have to be careful not to become jaded. I see it a lot in judges. They start out really fair, and then they start lumping everybody as, this guy's guilty, this guy's guilty. And lawyers can do the same thing. So I always tell people, sometimes you have to take a step back and really look at it with a clear head, a clear mind, and say, am I becoming jaded? Am I lumping this client with the other 10 that had similar factual scenarios? If we do that, we do a disservice, and I agree the person should get a new lawyer. But also, we may end up having somebody who's innocent plead guilty or whatever the outcome would be, which we got to push back against that. There's enough prosecutors, police, and judges on the other side who want to put them in prison, so we should at least be willing to hear them out.
Oh, yeah. And, nothing's worse than an innocent client. That's the biggest nightmare in the business.
So, Corinne, your background, how did it help shape you to do what you do today?
Yeah, absolutely. So backpacking off what both of you has said, just making sure that your clients' rights are upheld, because we are all one, action or mistake away of being in that defendant's chair. I think what sparked my advocacy and passion for going into the field, though, was not only the potential trauma of going through the criminal legal system, but just seeing all the barriers that people experience after the fact, whether it's a conviction, whether it's a dismissal, even just an arrest. What criminal records can do completely changes an individual. And this goes for people who are innocent, people who are proven guilty, convicted. You lose access to basic housing, getting jobs, travel restrictions, education opportunities. I mean, I can go on. And to expect people to bounce back from that is extremely difficult, if not impossible. So if there's anything I can do to assist people to avoid going through that, and having more barriers, because life's already hard, it's expensive, it's difficult, inflation's outrageous. So if there's anything I can do to help and advocate for people to not have all these extra barriers that criminal records cause, innocent or not, it's something that I strive for. And it's a great passion of mine. Love what I do.
I'm glad you say that, because one of the things I'm always saying, what you said is true. If somebody goes to prison for any amount of time, it severely alters the trajectory of their life. But a lot of times I'm pointing out to especially judges and prosecutors, where if I have a client that's sitting in jail pre-trial, if it's 6 months, 12 months, sometimes 2 years, I'm sorry, if I had to go sit down for 2 years, I'd lose my house, my cars, everything would be gone. If I had to go to jail for pre-trial, and the person sitting in jail pre-trial has not been convicted, but their life is severely affected. Look, I get it 100%. So I would like to know, Edward, I'll start with you. What sets you apart? Because there's so many criminal defense attorneys in Chicago where you are and all over the country that probably come to Chicago to do work. What sets you apart from other lawyers?
Well, there's a lot of different factors that come into it. I used to run a corporation, and I kind of bring that into the law firm life. It all starts with your staff and bringing in great people. That's how I found Corinne. I saw her on YouTube, and I was amazed by what she was doing. She was doing a lot of different podcasts. I was like, oh, she's really into this. She's a great advocate. So I brought her in for this trial and some other, we do a lot of cash forfeitures and criminal defense. And having someone like her who's just devoted to this, she works I think 25 hours a day, basically on anything we're given on. Having that, then having the infrastructure in, really sets us apart. Like, there's single lawyer shops. We're not that. We have access to a lot of different attorneys. If you have a serious criminal case, we try to put together the dream team. I know people use that back from the Olympics, but
We use that. We use that in our
yeah,
firm.
there's certain other lawyers who bring them in if it's a sex case or if it's a drug case. So, we'll bring in experts. We're trying to build the best defense team for you. And that's what sets us apart. And we're available. I have a lot of staff and they're qualified and fantastic. They love their job. Everyone's happy to be here. And we're trying to communicate with you on a daily basis. We also put in a lot of technology that helps. We have this great software called HONA that actually keeps you up to date on the different steps in your case, from arraignment all the way to sentencing or acquittal. And then we push it through the expungement, or we'll take it in a different direction. Automated messaging before court. We actually go through all the discovery and go through it with you and have it accessible. It's really important to use the technology as just an absolute launching pad. And that's what we're doing. And when we're in contact with everyone, it really helped the client satisfaction. And the reviews show. We have over in 2 offices, almost 200 5-star reviews on Google. Everyone's been very happy. Our recent client, Stephen Coaxum, is very happy. And I think Corinne can even talk more about how she was surprised at how organized we were.
That's not typical in a law firm.
No, as the paralegal, I'm expecting to burn out a bunch of fires. And I was like, oh, everything has a place and there's a system for, wow, this is crazy.
So how would you touch on that, Corinne? What sets you apart? I know Edward kind of gave us a good bit of information on what you bring to his trial team, but I want you to give me a little bit more.
Absolutely. Well, the first question I get asked, when someone tells me what I do, or, what is even a freelance paralegal? And the difference between a traditional paralegal and a freelance paralegal is that I'm independent. I have my own business. I'm a small, business owner as well. And I come in either on a project basis where maybe an attorney just needs some legal research done or some drafting done, and that's it. Or on more of an ongoing basis, like I do with Edward, where there's constant work that needs to be done. This can range from doing client intake, discovery review, which is one of my favorite things. I love to do deep dives. I'm a huge nerd. Legal research, writing, all the way up to trial support. And I also do post-conviction relief. Even after the case has already been completed and there's a conviction on someone's record, I assist with criminal expungements and pardons for specific states. So I'm very versatile. And I think having that versatility in your flexibility hours-wise, what you can work on, having someone that's experienced that can just come into the law firm, hit the ground running without a ton of training or trying to show you how things are done, just saves the law firms a lot of time and money. And I think as the legal field continues to rely on tech and being more versatile in how they serve clients, there's going to be more of a need for freelancers. So just to sum that up, having the flexibility to come in and hit the ground running, having the experience to do so, and just having the passion and being able to work with so many different people, you're able to adapt and learn and bring a fresh perspective, I think, so much more than potentially a traditional paralegal.
I always say the public in general, they don't realize that lawyers need a team. Edward, you and I were talking before we press record that one of the things we have to do as lawyers is this. For example, if a person goes to medical school, they just have to learn medicine. And when they get out, they practice medicine and they stay up to date on medicine. We lawyers, we have to go to law school and learn the law. And then when we get out of law school, because that's all they teach us in law school is law, right? We have to get out, we have to learn medicine. We have to learn about scientific evidence, DNA, fingerprints. We have to learn about cell phone data and GPS data. It's almost impossible for us to do as one person. So having a lawyer who has a team, I tell everybody, is what you want and what you need if you want to really improve your chances of being successful in the courtroom.
What sort of guys do you work with, Chris?
We do a lot of violent crime cases. We'll typically have DNA experts, cell phone experts to do data dumps, because one of the things I learned recently is that when they're doing these cell phone dumps, I think you guys may have done that in the case we're talking about. When they're doing these cell phone dumps and there's GPS data, the experts for the state will try to say that these coordinates are 100% foolproof, and that's not true.
Not
In
true.
fact, if it's an ankle monitor or a cell phone, the way they test the accuracy is in open fields. Like you go to Nebraska and you put it in a cornfield. That's how they rate their accuracy. But in real life, this stuff bounces off cars, buildings, trees, anything that's there. I had a case where they were saying my client was in the house committing a crime, but he wasn't. He couldn't have been. And it was just misinterpretation of the GPS coordinates by the state's experts. Now, do I fully understand that? No, I don't. But I have enough sense to know I need to go get help to explain it to a jury.
There's absolute horror stories with that stuff.
There's so many lawyers that just accept it. I'll say, they got you on the ankle monitor. They got you on a camera. And then they'll have somebody on the camera, but the time will be wrong. So, my guy was there 2 hours ago, but that camera is wrong. I tried a case where a young man was accused of shooting up a motel with an AK-47, and the reason we were able to take apart the timeline was because the cameras at the apartment complex had the wrong time, and once we figured that out, it was obvious that it was impossible for my guy to be involved. So,
No, it's great.
let's give the public something to ponder. If you guys could give us a 30,000-foot overview of this case.
Yeah, we're down in Peoria, Illinois. It's the land of Lincoln. It's about 3 hours south of Chicago. Richard Pryor's from there. It used to be the headquarters of Caterpillar. It's a pretty southern state. There's a graduation ceremony on a Saturday. A couple people leave the graduation to go sell some drugs, and all of a sudden they get shot in their car. The police do a cell phone pull off the cell towers, and they pick up a description of a silver Malibu. They run the license plate. They coordinate the license plate with the cell tower readings. They come back to Latrice Winston, who rented the car several days before that, and they think that is the car that's involved in the shooting of the individual. They interviewed a month later Latrice Winston after that, and then somehow implicated Mr. Coxum in her brief 3-hour interview that went nowhere with loaded questions, from the detective on the case. And then Mr. Coxum was in jail for 2.5 years. We're able to go to trial.
Nah, that's tough. Had he been in prison before that or jail before that?
He'd been in and out. There'd been a couple other issues he had with other things, but unrelated to any sort of background with Roger Broder. He didn't know this man, wasn't involved with him. It turns out Latrice Winston had a brother that was killed by somebody that was friends with Roger, and they had been going through a couple different counties in that area trying to kill each other all the way up till this happened. So the woman renting the car, she rents probably 20 cars a year through her business and lets everybody in the community use them. My client had a relationship with her and was using the car, but they returned it the same day for them to get a car for them to help her sister move, which was a truck. And the state's attorney's office thinking that's enough to charge you with, a pretty much murder, the most serious charges. And we weren't having any of it. It's one of those cases where you're going, what? Where's everything? And me and Corinne were going through it going, there has to be more than this. There has to be this. And we're like, what? That's why when we got to the cell phone data, we're going, it's got to put them there right at the exact time. And there's no way that, you got to think. You're going through. We had other paralegals looking at it in the office. They're saying, no, it's just the day before and the day after. They don't have anything directly connecting to it that day. Well, we found some text messages that were happening back and forth, but they weren't really related to what was happening. There was kind of a little bit of a discussion, but nothing that really established that they had a plan to go do this. And it was wild. So we couldn't wait to go to trial. This was something that absolutely we're like, I can't wait to see what they say on the stand. And we go to trial and they can't find Latrice Winston. She's gone. She's in the wind. Gone. So we demand trial. We wait 2-3 months. They still don't find her. They say, all right, we're going to elect on a different case that he's charged with. They did a search warrant, found some weapons in his house during this, unrelated to the crime. He was living with some other people. They had some weapons. They were trying to say they're his. So they're going to elect on that case. We kind of shut everything down. They call us 2 days before we're supposed to go to trial, or like a week maybe, go, oh no, we found her. She's in custody. We're going to be ready. There's like 5 days left on the speedy demand, meaning the case was going to get dismissed if they didn't go to trial. So they try to reelect, then they find her. So we kind of scramble to get down there, and we pick a jury on a Monday, and all the rest is history from there.
Let me ask you, since judges don't have the ability to do that in Louisiana, you said the case is going to get dismissed if they don't take it to trial within what?
120 days.
Oh, wow.
If you're in custody, yeah.
They
And
have,
under the new law, if you have a bond hearing and they don't let you out while the trial's pending, it's 90 days.
they can hold people up to 120 days on a murder before they even charge them.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy. That is unconstitutional.
Whoa. 100%.
That's why Louisiana has the highest incarceration rate in the world, more than China, more than Russia.
All my professors, I went to University of Denver, they talked about Louisiana. I tried to work at the public defender's office out of law school because they said, if you want to do all the cases in the world, that's the place to grind it out. And I think they would forgive your student loans for half the time if you worked there because the workload's so crazy.
Here's an example, and then we'll continue on. What does manslaughter carry in Illinois?
I think it's 6 to 20 at 50%.
Manslaughter in Louisiana carries up to 40.
Wow. At 100%, or do you have to do all the time, or?
Yeah, it's 100%. If there's a firearm involved, it's 15 to 40. If there's no firearm involved, it's 0 to 40. But you have to do 100% of the time. That's life, right?
Yeah, double
Yeah.
life. Damn.
Well, first degree or second degree murder in Louisiana is automatic life without parole.
Who passed all these laws? Was there just some huge racist Supreme Court people that pushed all this stuff through, like Rehnquist, or like what?
We just got rid of an old Jim Crow law about 5 years ago. A verdict in a criminal case, you only needed 10 people to convict. So a 10-2 verdict convicted people all the time. They essentially eliminated minority influence on the jury. It took the U.S. Supreme Court to clear that up.
I remember you telling me that when we first talked, and I was like, what are you saying? That is wild.
Chris, I have a question for you. I heard from someone that used to live in Louisiana that there's a law down there that still says women are considered property, like they're considered chattel or something. Is that true, or was someone trying to mess with me?
No, I don't believe that's true.
Okay, so we're not quite to that extreme.
There may be some men that live in this state who believe that, but the law doesn't acknowledge that.
Okay, thank God.
I know, right? You guys' case, why is it important for the public to know about it?
I think that what you see, obviously, on TV and movies and stuff, looking at trials and in the legal field is not accurate. You know, everything's super quick. It's always juicy. It's always action. It's not always like that. And it's okay that it's not, always action or it's not always super deep, because this case in particular, it was solely based off circumstantial evidence. And, the jury instructions say you can take that into consideration, but that doesn't have to be enough to convict somebody. So if a case is, boring and it's not proven enough beyond a reasonable doubt, it's okay to say no to that. I think a lot of people think, oh, well, why isn't the defense, doing XYZ and being super zealous and aggressive? If they don't need to be that way, and if that's not their strategy, that's all right. So I think it's important to know that obviously cases don't always play out how you see on TV and the movies, and it's just based on that burden that the state has to prove. If it's not met, it's not met. It's nothing that you've seen or read. You don't have to take any of that into consideration. And I think this case is one of those examples where it wasn't super zealous or aggressive, but, we still did our due diligence to look through everything and make sure that the state couldn't prove their burden. It was all circumstantial. There was no DNA. There was no fingerprints. There was no witnesses. There was no videos, no photos. I mean, again, like Edward said earlier, it was just, we're waiting for them almost at the edge of our seat this whole time to present something that never came. So yeah, just seeing cases like that and how that could be the norm or not, depending on what people see in the media, I think is important.
Your thoughts, Edward?
It shows you justice works. That's the takeaway from this, is that you will get a fair day in trial, and you will have your day in trial, and the state isn't always right. Their conviction rate in Peoria, we've done other murders there and won those. They really are grasping at straws, so to speak. And one thing to take home from that is, they can indict you, but that doesn't mean they can find you guilty. They can indict a ham sandwich. at a grand jury. There's not much. I don't know if you heard that one, Chris, but
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
not much to find probable cause on somebody. But to put them through that, at the end of the day, get the W because they couldn't prove the case. It's not as easy as an affirmative defense, but picking the jury and doing a jury trial really eliminates a lot of the bias from the judges, from the state's attorney, and it makes it a fair field. And it
Yep.
really put us in a great spot based on the jurors we got. And, the people they had on the trial were the supervisors of the state's attorney's office. And these are good trial attorneys and they buttered them up. But you could tell when the jury's hearing the evidence and they show you just a car with nobody in it driving past with its windows down and you can't see who's in it, like, how are you going to convict this man right here based on that? And they could see through it. We didn't put on as many exhibits as we wanted, but they were out for a day and a half mulling this over, and then they came out and got the not guilty, and they were happy about it. The jurors were the most diverse jury I've had down there, and there's people from all walks of life. We were able to keep somebody who was actually had a criminal record on there, which was fantastic for us, obviously.
No doubt. One thing I always say is I don't know if a lot of prosecutors understand this. As a criminal defense attorney, when somebody hires us, it's our job to stand with them, for them, fight for them until the case is over. That's not the same job the prosecutor technically has. Like, if they indict somebody and they legitimately believe this person is not guilty of the crime, they're supposed to dismiss it. That's what they're supposed to do. Their job is different than ours. I tell people, look, my client is a member of the public as well, so you owe him a duty, just like the public as a whole. If a part of you doesn't believe this man is guilty, you are supposed to dismiss the case. And how often does that happen?
Not enough, Chris.
Rare.
It doesn't happen enough.
When people get arrested, first of all, you get arrested. It's on the newspaper. It's on social media. And there's always this assumption that he or she must have done something wrong. And if we accepted that, we may as well go live under a dictatorship because it wouldn't be good. Clearly, we can see from the political climate in our country, if we didn't have a judicial system to kind of stand as a barrier, we'd be much worse off than things appear to be going presently. I want to hear about your client. When you guys first met him, what were some doubts and fears you had, and what was his demeanor like?
The backstory is I actually was hired by Latrice Winston, which was their head witness. She hired me, said, Stephen's in trouble. He's in jail in Peoria. Can you go down there? I'm like, we're in Chicago. It's going to be hard, but yes. She told me what was going on. She heard that we won these other trials down there. The bad thing about Peoria is there's not as many trial attorneys that aren't jaded, like you said, and they wanted somebody to come in from the city. I said, we do that all the time. I have paralegals that can travel down there with the trial. So we go down there. I meet this guy. He is a teddy bear.
Really?
He's one of the nicest guys. Yes. He is a nice, cool cat. Talks out of the side of his mouth. He's all smiles. I met his mom. She's having health problems, but he's okay. Got a stepdad. They're there at every court date. They're worried about him. We met some of his other friends. He has a lot of girlfriends. They were all involved. They all helped chip in and come in. Like he's part of the community.
He's a lovable guy. That's why he had all the girlfriends. A teddy bear.
He is. Yeah. Everyone likes him. Even the police knew him. And some of the search warrant body cams, they were talking about how they knew him. It's just like, we got to do this. This is what we're told to do. And they're kind of going through the motions down there. But the interesting thing was just meeting him is how nice he was, polite, and he knew exactly what happened. He had told us, I didn't do this. And that's all you got to say to me. Like, if you just come out and say, like, I didn't do this, you got to get me out of it. Like, that's all I need to hear. Like you said, I'm going to fight with you all the way to the end. We're going to take it as far as we can. And, I'm sure you've had clients like that you're just going, this doesn't fit with what he's charged with at all.
Let me tell you, I have a pending case right now. Well, I'm going to say what I can say. It was on national news. There was 10 or 11 guys broke out of the New Orleans jail. Did you guys see that?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I represent a young lady who was charged with aiding or abetting, like accessory after the fact. And I met with her and she broke down and she cried. And she is a preschool teacher with a 4-year-old child and she has never been in trouble. And Without going into the facts, there's nothing about the facts that suggests this lady had any involvement. But they put an 80-year-old grandmother in jail because her grandson was one of the escapees and he called her. What do you call it? They're trying to clean up their image publicly so anybody they can remotely implicate, they're doing it. I told my fiance after I talked to the client, I said, I feel so bad for this lady. Like, it was an emotional meeting. And they said everybody, accessory after the fact, they said everybody they arrested for supposedly helping the inmates, they said their bond at $1 million.
Come on, $1
Every
million.
last one of them.
Wow.
What an overcorrection. Because they
Big
look
time.
bad. They got to lock everybody up. That's absurd.
Let's dive into some of this evidence. Before trial, you get what's called discovery, which is where the prosecution has to turn over the evidence. What evidence, if any, did they turn over that you guys found problematic?
There was some interesting text messages that came through, but there was also like a lot of question marks and other things we got. We got a PowerPoint presentation that looked like it was from the state's attorney's office, like prepping this case. Like it had 50 slides and to what they thought the strengths and weaknesses of their case was. No joke. Like it was in the discovery. I showed it to Corinne. We're like, this looks like theirs, right? Like it was like work product. They just turned it over. So we kind of had a roadmap of where they thought it was a bad case, which helped. But there was just some cell phone conversations with Stephen, but we thought like Latrice Winston's cell phone was the worst, in the case, but don't want to jam her up too much. There was other evidence from other players involved that really pointed towards them, and it just had our guy who had used her car. Symptomatic as that sounds, like it was concerning that they had talked, but it didn't have anything bad on there. And I know, Corinne, you went through the cell phone, like you found all those other conversations. We looked through everything else. Like, was there any stuff that you were kind of concerned with until we talked to that cell phone expert that you want to talk about?
Yeah, not on our client's phone, not on Steven's phone. I mean, obviously we already discussed how he's a lovable guy, is talking to a lot of different girlfriends, but not, directly related to our case. So there was that. But I would have to agree. I think it was Latrice Winston's that was a little bit more concerning. And it's interesting with the cell phone stuff, again, the content wasn't concerning, but the big crux for the state was the cell phone data and the location data supposedly pinning him, to this car and where it was going. When you look at the cell phone data that they have, and there are these big circles of where the phone could be, and it's just this little, drop that's pinning off the tower. Okay, so in this, 20-mile radius area is where the phone could be, and the phone, not even him. So they had that in their presentation, and we're like, oh, look, here's where the phone could be, and here's where the car was, and we're like, okay, so yeah. Other than some conversations, there's thousands and thousands of files and videos, and like Edward and we already talked about, we're still anticipating and waiting. Like, there's got to be something we missed, and all of these thousands of files of discovery, and it just didn't add up.
Sometimes I think they do that on purpose. They just dump a massive load of crap on you, and then you go through it, and then you're like, what did I miss? I need to go through this again. I'll get cases where 100 hours of video, and there may be like 2 minutes of substance. I think they do that on purpose. I don't think that's accidental. I think that's on purpose.
100%.
What they sent us in size-wise of these cell phone records was hundreds of gigabytes. We had to put it in a special computer to go through it. We go through it all. We're seeing these giant red coverage. The whole city of Peoria is covered, and they're going, oh, well, it shows it here on this license plate reader 3 hours before, and then nothing. We're going, what? Ooh, where's the rest of it? I think the client was smart too. We didn't get a bunch of jail calls like at the end of the case where they kind of record all the calls and try to have you go through those at the end too, like hundreds of hours of phone calls. Didn't have that. That was nice.
There is this AI. It's called otter.ai. You can dump audio into it. It'll transcribe it, or video, actually.
Really?
I've heard of that.
It's about 95% accurate. It's going to screw up names, but for the most part, if the audio is clear, you'll get a transcript in 2 minutes.
Wow.
Otter.ai.
I got to plug CSA Legal. They are fantastic court reporters for anything you're trying to get a legal transcription for, and they crank it out, and they'll put descriptions and what's on the video in subtext for the transcript. We've used them. They're fantastic. You upload the video, they send you an invoice. It's not super expensive, and it's all certified. So CSA Legal.
CSA Legal. I'm going to have to make a note of that. Let's dive into you guys' strategy. You get the discovery, and now it's time to bring the team together and form a strategy, form a defense, and how you're going to keep your client or free your client. Tell me about that.
So we look at who the players is. It's Detective Hulse. He was a main detective on a biker gang shooting we did a couple years before that. So I called in, I would say, a seasoned trial attorney, John Moralia. He knows this officer. He's gone at it with him in a different trial. I'm going, you want another shot at this guy? He says, absolutely. We bring him in. Me and Corinne spend the weekend. We go through the whole case with him and get him. He gets all fired up. He's going, they can't prove this. It's time to go. It's time to do this. We start planning everything out. We get the exhibits. We go through there was a couple of interviews with Latrice Winston. Then we realize, where's the victim's cell phone? We have all this other cell phone data. They didn't give us anything related to the actual victim. We had to beg them like a month beforehand to get his cell phone data to see what he was doing. And we finally got that. That really helped kind of plan our framework as to it's all going to be about a timeline and whether they can prove Stevens in the car. And they can't. And then that's ultimately where we got with it.
Let's go to the trial. Obviously, pre-trial, you form your defense or your strategy, how you're going to tackle the case. And you start in jury selection. Whatever your defense is, you start voir direing or questioning the jury in line with your defense. So tell me about jury selection with respect to your client in this case.
Just a little background with me. I studied in Denver. They have a different kind of jury selection approach. The public defender's office has implemented it. They came to our school. They have it in Colorado. They haven't had anyone convicted of a death penalty since 1976 or something with this different methodology.
Is it the Colorado method?
Yep, it's the Colorado method. Exactly. It's great. I love it. It's worked great in Illinois. I moved back here. There's a little bit more crime in Chicago than Denver. So,
That's right.
the business is good here. So, and we're just implementing this beautiful strategy they came up with. I went through the laws and we found that there's certain statutes that allow us to get early access to the jury information ahead of time instead of having to take notes the whole time when these jurors come in. So I'm able to go through it with Corinne. We both kind of take our approach. We start going through it. All of a sudden they come in and I'm looking at these jurors and I'm going, oh, this is bad. This is like a lot of, older retired people that are all in there. And they go, Latrice, we can't find her. So we can't do the trial today. We got to come back in 2 weeks. So I'm sitting there looking at these jurors. I'm going, uh-oh, not good, not good, not good, not good. We're in trouble here. We're going to burn all our preempts. We're going to go through. This is going to be a tough trial. They come in. We're not ready. So we leave. I'm like, wow, we got lucky.
Thank you.
Come back. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Latrice. Latrice is the gift we've done getting, right? Yeah. And we come back 2 weeks later. Fantastic jury. We have everyone who's students, retired people, engineers, super smart people, doctors. There's a lot of people that travel that came back here. There's a really unique juror that worked at the fish market all the time, 20 minutes in his bardier. It was amazing. They ended up kicking him off, but just all types of people. And it's what you want. You want to get rid of the people that you think aren't going to be able to be swayed. And we did that beautifully. It really worked out for us. And do they do backstriking when you pick juries?
We do backstrikes.
Yeah, see, there's no backstriking with us. And knowing that, you're trying to find these middle ground people, but you're trying to get rid of the worst juror. You're not trying to find the best juror. You're just trying to get rid of the worst ones. And we were able, with no backstriking, kind of sneak in the guy who had these other felony convictions on the jury. It was wild. And they wanted to backstrike him. They couldn't. So we got him on, and it ends up he talked to the Coaxum's mom afterwards and was like, I really went to bat for your son here. And the jury told her that. That at the end. They saw each other in the hallway. I'm like, well, only in a small city like this that happens, that you get that feedback from the jurors. The jury selection, we felt really good about it. We were in the meeting room after the selection, and we just felt like it can't get better than this.
So, Corinne, tell me, during jury selection, Edward is up doing all the talking, asking all the questions. How do you assist him during that time?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, the attorneys are obviously focused on what they're going to say and what they're going to ask. So I'm more of the background support where I focus on the jury's reactions to questions and what they're, reacting to what other people are saying, and kind of one more of those nonverbal cues. There's some statistic out there that said, you can only gauge from someone how they're feeling, but what is it, 10% of what they're saying and 90% of what they don't say. So I'm focused on the 90% of what they're not saying, and then relaying that to the attorneys to be like, okay, I think they really meshed with you guys in this way, maybe this person not so much. So I'm focused on more of the nonverbal cues to kind of gauge people if they're willing to be impartial, willing to be open-minded, and obviously have some type of knowledge about how the system works. I think Edward could agree there was maybe a couple people that we called airheads, or were kind of just weren't going to really understand or get the case or the circumstantial versus not evidence. So that's kind of what I was focused on, like people who are, intelligent, understood, open-minded, impartial, and obviously diverse. Again, I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota, so I was newer to Chicago and even more brand new to Peoria. And to see how much, diversity there is in Peoria for such a smaller city was really, really cool to see. So we were looking for that, and we got that, and that was awesome.
I went to Jerry Spencer's trial lawyer college 10 years ago, maybe longer, 2012, I believe. And one of the things that they stressed is that a good jury selection, a good opening statement, the case is over. I wouldn't say that's entirely true, because a lot of stuff can happen during a trial, but that certainly gets you headed in the right direction. So let me ask you, we always, as lawyers, we tend to focus on trying to make sure there's no jurors on our jury who have biases that could adversely affect our client. But I want to know, how do you guys deal with that? But more importantly, how do you guys deal with your own biases? Because we bring our own biases into the courtroom. I'll give a personal example. I tried a case, an attempted murder trial. And look, there was this old white guy. He was tall, slim. He had a long beard. He had long hair. The guy fit the mold of everything I had been taught to avoid as a young black man. Like this, a white guy that looks like this, stay away. But everything the guy said, and like you said, Corinne, his body language and everything I got from him made me say, like, I realized I was being biased towards this guy. And I was like, I really got to let this go, because this guy seems like an awesome person. So long story short, we selected him on the jury. He ended up being the foreman on the jury. He had previously served on a jury in a death penalty case, and he had voted for death. And one of the things I said in closing argument was, my client was a young black kid. One of the things I said in closing argument is, if we're going to give Andre a fair trial, you guys are going to have to strip down almost naked. I said that. And just look at the facts and evidence. And I talked to him after the trial, and he said, what you said really stuck with us, that statement about stripping down naked and looking at the facts and evidence. So Edward, touch on that. How do you deal with jury bias? And if, in this case, you had any of your own bias or reservations you had to kind of hold in check?
I think I might have to steal that get naked one from you, strip down. I like that. That's a great way to really internalize everything with the jury and make them think, bring it kind of close to home. Like our approach is with these questionnaires that we get early is, without seeing what the juror looks like, is we're trying to, for certain flags, especially myself, is for people that aren't going to be eligible. First of all, there's some sort of default situations where people can't take this much. They can't take a week off. There's certain stuff. And to start looking then a couple head of the other ones. So you see all the jurors that are in the box, then you start looking at the people who you have these questionnaires, you're trying to guess who they are in the gallery. And we're trying to deal with these biases. And like one thing that I completely am biased over is something that I've worked on, but I immediately think anyone that is retired is stuck in their ways. They've already made up their mind. They're hyper conservative. Everybody's kind of guilty, and the Lord will provide the type of punishment. But you meet these people, and we had a guy on there that was arrested and he got exonerated for some crimes. And, when you first look at this guy, you're seeing that he had worked and then he had gotten in trouble, then he was exonerated. And when you look at his jury question, you're thinking this guy's going to nail our guy to the cross here. And it didn't. He ended up being involved. He was actively involved. There's a lot of people too that I think are great. And then we start asking them questions and they say things that you're going, we got to either go for cause or use a preempt. Like, we got to get rid of them. And I try to use all my preemptive strikes because you can never go back. So, and this time we only used 5, which usually I'm through the 7 and we're fighting with the judge over cause every single time.
Do you get the typical lawyer anxiety where you're like, I got all these peremptory strikes left, but I like the people. Do I need to just use them because I have them?
I try to look at how many I have and then who's coming up. And that's really, we're trying to look at what the state's attorney's doing, if they're burning through them, if they're going to be in a situation. And sometimes you'll see, like, you'll try to get to other people. And I've used that before and it's been worth it. And it's all about really having a melting pot of people in the jury. And if you can't, you might as well burn them all and then you can argue later in an appeal. But we haven't had to have Corinne do any post-litigation for us because we're just walking everybody right now. So
that's good.
The approach is working, right?
I just knocked
no
on
appeals
wood.
here. It really helps this. It's all about the jury. It really levels the playing field for your clients when you have this approach and are being successful.
How long did the jury selection process take?
About 5 hours, like half the day. Usually it takes a full day, though. If it has to take 2 days, we'll go through the whole jury panel, unapologetic for it. Like, this is what it matters. This is what all the work's for. And if we're not ready to do opening, we got to make it to the end of the day anyway. So this was a unique situation where the state's attorney asked everyone the same questions each time they brought a new panel in. That kind of pissed the jurors off. You could tell they didn't want to be asked the same question. Are you going to uphold the will you find Mr. Coxon guilty? And they kept asking each scene, and they're like, all right, okay, this is going to take, people are looking at their watches in the jury box.
It sounds like you guys' jury selection is similar to ours. They put a certain number of people in the box.
Yep.
How many? 12, 16?
They do 12.
12. And then everybody else is sitting in the audience, right?
Yep, they're all in the audience.
Okay. So let me tell you, one of the things I do in jury selection, you may do this as well, but it's one of the things I actually show lawyers how to do. And the most I've done is 35. It was a trial in New Orleans. So however many people they put in the box, by the time I get up to start doing my voir dire, I memorize everybody's name.
Whew.
Every last one of
Wow.
That's a talent.
That's wild.
It's not a talent. It's a skill that can be learned. So all it is the concept of chunking.
Okay.
The human brain can remember 3 to 7 things, cell phone numbers. So if you had 21 people in the box, it's really difficult to remember 21 names. But it's not hard to remember 3 groups of 7.
Ooh.
It's really not. And so I'll write the names down. And at this point, I can probably retain all the names in like 10 minutes. It's just chunking. Look, y'all have kids?
No.
Nope.
Here's a classic example I tell people. You guys went to school. If you had to learn 10 spelling words, if you went through all 10 of them, like practice 10, it's going to take you a lot longer than if you put them on index cards and group them into 3. 3, 3, and 4. You're going to remember quicker. The same thing is remembering names. The reason I think it's helpful to remember people's names, I've done jury selection where I did a jury selection like this, and the prosecutor offered my client a misdemeanor at the end of jury selection. He had never seen me before, so he was like, he approached the bench before jury selection, and he said, Judge, there's 3 lawyers over there. I only want one of them talking to the jury. And I was like, what is this guy talking about? So we got up and I memorized every last one of them's name. And this has happened in more than one trial, but they'll be like, wow, how did you do that? And it's nothing special.
I don't know, man. That seems special to me. There's so many things going on in the courtroom at that time. To be able to sit there and take that in is special.
Just try it. I'm telling you, you can do it. Look, and then there's this quote, and then we'll move on. Napoleon Hill, he wrote the Think and Grow Rich. Here's a quote I always give people from Napoleon Hill. The sweetest sound to a man's ear is the sound of his own name. You gain some credibility by knowing their names, especially because the prosecutor's fumbling with the paper and all of that.
Is it first and last names? Or are you doing the first names? Or?
Just last name.
Oh,
Well, you could
last
do
names.
first name, but
Okay.
I typically do last name.
Okay.
It makes it a little easier. You only memorize one part.
Yeah. I'm not calling him by the first name. I have never
Yeah,
tried it
yeah,
that way.
yeah. No, that's good. That is slick. That's a whole different ballgame there.
You finished jury selection, and now we move to opening statement. So I want to hear about, tell me what the prosecutor said in his or her opening statement and how you dealt with it in your own opening statement.
When we talked beforehand, you're always nervous about the opening. You're trying to feed off what the state's attorney's going to do and hit that high point, and kick the chair out from underneath them right away if you can, trying to see what they're going to say and keep the jury's attention. And the openings, the prosecutor kept calling the Malibu a Camaro. Like, noticeably kept going, in this Camaro. And me and Corinne are looking at each other going like, what? Why does he keep saying it's definitely not a Camaro? That's a very distinct car. Later the prosecutor said, well, I used to have one thinking it was a Camaro. I did the opening and immediately said, like, you're not going to find a Camaro anywhere in this case, right? Like there won't be. If you can find one, I'll be shocked. I think there's something to that matter. And they had done like a tremendous amount of license plate readers. I don't know if they have those down in Louisiana, but they had these stills, and one of the rental cars that had been used after the Malibu had been exchanged was a Chevy Avalanche, and there was a license plate reader, they zoomed out and they showed the truck full of a bunch of different, there's like a coat rack and a dresser and a mattress in it. And they're trying to say that the reason he must have done this is because they switched the car out that day. There's no reason to think that this car was used for anything more than murder, and then they went and got a truck. And that's the first photo I had to show him was this truck was moving things. Wait till you see this license plate reader photo of this truck full of someone's gear that they're helping move down to Decatur. And you can see the jurors is kind of like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then the police immediately go to the rental car place. And what do? They try to fingerprint the car. Do they check it for DNA? Do they get any sort of gunshot residue off the car? No, they just have a guy on there who tried to pull a print off the passenger window, and that was it. They had nothing even showing our client was in the car. And that's stuff that we just immediately pointed out right away, trying to tell them they can't prove this. They don't have these certain types of evidence. And it really, really kept everyone's attention. And it wasn't too long, but the state's attorney kept talking about this relationship with Latrice and Stephen, and that has to be, why this happened, and that like she's somehow like puppet mastering him around. And they can't even show that they were together on that time, besides when they brought the car back. Maybe they have her back there at the Enterprise, but it didn't really show Stephen was there at all. And so we were able to talk about those things in opening. I think it set the tone. Then it was off to the races at that point.
So after opening statements, that's when we get into the prosecution or the state calling its witnesses. So who were some of the key witnesses? What did they testify to? And how did you guys deal with that on cross?
Well, the interesting part was there was a passenger in the vehicle of the victim, and who was supposedly the intended target. And about 4 or 5 questions in, he immediately pled the fifth.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Well, asked him a couple of questions, then he goes, "Can I plead the fifth?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure."
He did that on direct or on cross?
On cross of us. Yeah. On direct, he said, "I was just leaving the graduation. I was in the car." I mean, Corinne, what was it?
He said, oh, me and the driver, the victim, we walked from the graduation to my friend's house, the driver's house, and then we were going to take the car, bring it back to the graduation to pick everyone up. So when we were on cross, we were like, oh, well, how long did it take you to walk there, from the graduation to the house? What route did you take? Because there was video footage of them driving from the graduation over to near his house and, during that route. So we knew that wasn't true. But yeah, when we were trying to get into the specifics, we got into a couple other specifics, and he's like, I plead the fifth.
Yeah, why was there 2 guns shoved under the victim's body in the chair, right? Like, who carries 2 guns on their lap? The first dash cam shows him in the front seat just kind of bending over, like obviously sticking a gun under that guy's lap after he got shot and just didn't want to talk about it. But that family had been in a dispute with the Winstons over a million different things over the last 6 months before that.
Years before that.
And they were all entrepreneurs, selling things to make money, meeting people, and that's what happens.
That had to be a tough blow for the prosecution to get this guy. He probably answered every question they asked and then shut down almost right away when you guys get to cross-examine him. And I tell people, like, juries are people. First of all, if you put a group of 12 people together, they're smarter than any single lawyer. So when they listen to this guy who gives whatever narrative he went along with went on direct, shut down immediately on cross, they just discount everything he says.
It looked bad.
Mm-hmm.
Who else did they call?
They called the other officers that came out to the scene, which was surprising. I think it was the two officers. It was a very short testimony just regarding what they found, who responded first, who they talked to kind of around that area. And then we broke for the day. So because we tried to pick the jury and then do openings, kind of get it going because we didn't want it to last all week. There was, a lot of people were trying to get out of there. So we just picked and went. We thought, like, wow, we really got lucky with the witness that pled the fifth. And then the two cops that they put on, they kind of said they found some footage that was around the area of the crime. And they can kind of show these cars coming through. And there's one car and then this other car. And then that was it. We knew the next day it was coming up with Detective Hulse, who's the main murder task homicide guy in Peoria. We knew that Detective Hulse somehow had started going to these cell phone classes to get these certifications. And he's got all these like fake science certificates now that he's like this cell phone expert that's going to just break this case wide open. And we had our ducks in a row. We had talked to real experts that used to work for the FBI that were out in New York, and they're going, there's nothing here. There's nothing this guy's going to be able to tell you. And we made them give us his certificates, all his training. They wouldn't give us the manuals, which is I really wanted to see that. I really would love to have access to some of the things law enforcement has. It seems like deck is stacked against you. We don't get access to it. They won't let us use the Cellbrite stuff. It's really, have you run into that before too, where you're trying to figure out like, how are they going to make this determination with these cell phone records? I'm sure, Chris, you must have seen it tons of times. And the FBI does a good job, but not Peoria Police Department. They weren't triangulating anything.
I'm going to plug AI here again. So I have Gemini Advanced. Like if you pay Google for Gemini, you get what's called deep research. And I've used crime scene investigation. That's the most recent deep research project I did. So essentially what you can do is you can say, create me a detailed report teaching me how cell phone triangulation works, what are the pros and cons of it, what's the error rate, rely on scientific journals, and then what it'll do is, if you go Gemini Deep Research, which is much better than ChatGPT Deep Research, it will create a research plan, which tells you, this is what I understand you want me to do. These are the kind of sources I'm going to look for. Here's an outline of how I'm going to structure the deep research project, and you get to edit it. If you don't like it, you can edit the research plan, and then you hit go, and it takes about 20 minutes. It really does deep research, and you'll get like a 10-page report with hyperlinks to scientific articles on whatever the subject matter is.
And it links articles too? It links articles?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Are those articles free? A lot of times you got to pay for those scientific articles.
Sometimes you do. Sometimes
Okay,
you do.
just curious. But that's still awesome.
I'll pay for it. If it's one that I really want, I'll pay for it and I'll keep it in my database. But look, Google Notebook LM, Gemini Deep Research. It's the weekend. Spend 30 minutes learning about those two, and I promise you'll incorporate them.
I'm doing it. No doubt about it.
Yeah,
So,
it's rainy and gross here, so we got time. It's not we
Same
got time
here.
to spend indoors.
It's been coming down all day. It's Detective Holtz. That's the expert.
That's the
Should I
guy.
call him that? for lack of better words.
He was a self-taught expert. These maps, like Corinne said, they were the whole city. It's the whole city. It's like, oh, it could be anywhere. There's like one tower and it goes the whole block, like everything in Peoria, across the bridge to the other part of the city, East Peoria. It's like, how are you going to put this guy here? Like, Corinne, what did you think about his testimony when he was up there?
It's funny, our strategy was to, poke holes in his investigation efforts because a lot of routes that they could have gone down that they didn't. There was a lot that they could have uncovered that they didn't. And with the data that they found out, again, like Edward said, it didn't pinpoint to what the state was trying to prove. So it was interesting when we were doing cross and we were asking him questions, he was very forthright and almost timid, admitting that, yeah, I guess you're right. I guess we didn't look into that, or we didn't follow up on that, or yeah, you're right. I guess, that is a possibility. So it wasn't, oh, well, kind of ego thing at all, which is what I've seen with other officers before. It was just very, yep, I guess you're right, and timid. And I think the more questions we asked, it seemed the more realization he had that a bunch of stuff was just kind of drawn out of thin air and then just put on this pathway wherever until he got arrested and to however they saw fit. So we definitely did our job, obviously.
You got to give him credit. He was forthcoming. He did say, with those issues, but all of a sudden he had maps that we had never seen before that were a little bit more, he kind of took those red things off. And it was just kind of pointing like a little triangle on there to make it seem like it was smaller. And we had to really get him to admit like, oh no, it's actually, this is a 40-mile radius that this whole thing could cover that's hidden in it. That's fair game, I think, all day. But he did the right thing on the stand, to say the least.
That's good to hear. Actually, it doesn't happen often enough. Say more about this GPS cell phone data. I say GPS cell phone data because a lot of times it's ankle monitors and a lot of times it's cell phone, which is essentially the same technology because ankle monitors use cell phone towers to pinpoint locations. If there's a client, such as your client in this case, who is allegedly a part of the crime because his cell phone places him at the scene, why is that not always true?
Well, he could have easily left his cell phone in the car and someone else could have taken the car. And when they did a search warrant on his house, they found 6 other phones in the house that were functional. He uses other phones. So maybe he's got a car phone, he's got the house phone, he's got a toilet phone, he's got one for work, one for the gym. He's got a lot of different phones. There's a lot of explanations. They didn't get into that.
Certain girlfriends have certain phones.
You lend other people that have phones. It's not a predominantly rich area. Other people need to get connected. They don't all need service. These new smartphones, you can just use Wi-Fi wherever it's offered. You don't need a plan. There's a lot of different things that there was. But he had one main phone and there was some conversations, but they weren't able to get that GPS. But you see in those ankle bracelets, like those look pretty accurate. When I've seen people in halfway houses leave and go to the street and they kind of can show you the ... where they went to a car and relapsed and went back into the halfway house and they weren't supposed to do that. But in the city in Chicago here, it bangs off these buildings. And so it could be 2 blocks off and the person's still sitting at their house just based off where clouds are or if a plane flies over. You can't even get directions deep in the loop here. Even on your cell phone, you got to know where you're going.
It's not an end-all be-all. If they say, look, we got cell phone coordinates putting you there or we got GPS putting you there, it could be wrong, right?
Yeah, and you got to tell your client, like, you need to know this before they go out and do anything. You got to be almost recording yourself live the whole time you're out, just so there's no miscommunication.
The interesting part about this cell phone data too, which I think I've never seen before, and correct me if I'm wrong, Edward, that you've never seen before, is that usually you get cell phone data from the provider of the cell phone. So, for example, say our client's phone was Verizon. Well, we didn't get the cell phone data from Verizon. Peoria Police Department put it in their own technology system called Trax and then mapped out the data themselves and then disclosed it to us. So it was super weird. We're just going based off the data that they inputted and then disclosed, which could have been false. It could have been, user error putting into it. There was nothing, again, with how Detective Hulse was the cell phone expert into how they mapped out the cell phone data to give to us. So that was also really odd.
Luckily, the technology wasn't as recent as it is, like how it doubled it every 16 months. Like this was 2022. Like that had a lot to do with it because this new cell data is ridiculous. It's 5G, 7G. They were able to pull her cell phone records like from a different phone like 2 months later because they were tracking them on a lot of different things. Once they kind of got wind of it, they let them sit to see if they would do something else illegal, which they didn't. There's nothing else going on, but that other cell phone data was pretty accurate. It looked bad. And so that's why when we were going through it, we're thinking, these guys have their own special proprietary software that they're tracking this. We're going to need an expert just to pick through it to see if it's legit. And we ended up getting lucky.
I think one of the things I tend to do when they supposedly have coordinates on my client, I kind of narrow it down to a timeline. And I didn't learn this by learning it. I learned it through a case. There was essentially a lady who was at home and her cell phone pinged off different towers. From the inside of her house was one tower, the front porch was a different one, and the back porch was another one. And, one of the things she said, I was home the whole time, and we were able to show that because she was a smoker, and she'd go out, you see her on the front porch, you see her on the back porch on her home surveillance cameras, which she was there the whole time. And I was like, before that happened, I kind of assumed that this technology was pretty flawless, but it's really not. Even the companies that sell the GPS monitors or cell phone providers, when they talk about the accuracy ratio of the coordinates, longitude and latitude, it's based on, I think I told you this before we started recording, Edward, they base their results on an open field in Nebraska. There's no buildings, there's no cars, there's no planes flying overhead. There's nothing else really to interfere with the signal. So what is the reliability in a neighborhood in Chicago or any city? They can't even tell us.
I think the strongest evidence I've seen used at trials when they triangulate it off 2 or 3 towers and someone's moving and kind of going in a certain direction. Like there was a couple cases I sat in federal court where they were doing straw purchases in Indiana, and a guy was on his cell phone from Indiana to Chicago, and it pinged off every tower. It put him right on the expressway coming up, and then he bought gas on his credit card, and then they kept going. That seemed pretty good. But they didn't have that in this case. They had their own type of software that wasn't triangulating because there was like pretty much 2 different towers because he was on Verizon, she was on T-Mobile or AT&T, and like that created some problems for them. And Verizon's a better network, but AT&T had like smaller towers, but they still, it's such a little city that there's only 2 or 3 main towers that can really catch the whole area because it is kind of like a field in Nebraska besides a couple big buildings, a bridge, and a bunch of hospitals. It wasn't that bad.
You guys were able to deal with that expert, Detective Holtz. Sounds pretty easily you were able to show the science he was relying on was unreliable. And if I'm understanding right, that is essentially the only thing they had placing your client at the scene of the homicide.
They had a couple license plate readers, but they really didn't have him in the car. They had kind of some testimony from Latrice that they went by the scene afterwards, right? Like she kind of said, well, we drove by before we took the rental car back because he told me that he didn't want to drive that car, which is kind of like more conclusive that somebody else was driving and he knows I don't want to be seen in this thing, was kind of more of an argument than it was he was actually involved in this. She had other brothers that were out of jail, and she had brothers in jail that had been in some cliques, and they were in the neighborhood, and they could easily have had some communications as to who was at this area. Those guys were also involved with other people, selling certain products and meeting people in the market, and they were armed to the teeth. They also said they saw a masked guy run out of the car that they never caught. There was a lot of the cell phone records were just a piece of it. Once you really came down to it, that just was like everyone's biggest fear. We're sitting here until we get these cell phone records figured out. We got to really concentrate on this because this could sink us. Luckily we did. We got it done fast. And then we realized we should get his cell phone records and then try to see exactly where that triangulates with who he was talking to, because the mom was interviewed. She was at the scene probably 3 minutes after it happened because it was right out of the graduation. And she goes, he was supposed to be selling somebody something over here. And she's sitting there talking to the police the whole time. So we're going, there's other people involved that could have easily have done this. And I think the jury saw that. And they saw a video of the Malibu leaving from a couple blocks down, and you can't see anyone in the car, which is the wild thing. I'd never seen anything like it. It was just really so unique as to, like, usually you can kind of see people in the car. They driving cars back to Enterprise, you couldn't see who's in the car. Maybe it's the technology or the megapixels, but that ultimately helped us as well. But you got to watch all that stuff. I mean, how many videos did we watch, Corinne, going through all that? It's just endless.
I don't know if I want to remember.
Hours.
I could check the invoice, I guess, for all those.
The Latrice, did she testify?
Yes, she did.
Tell us about that.
Well, let's talk about what she was wearing. That was interesting. She had on, I would call him the closest thing to like Michael Jackson Thriller, like the jacket that he wore in that, but they were shoes and they had every flap and chain on them and they were large and in charge. She looked unique with that. She had on, I think it was leopard leggings.
Cheetah print. Mm-hmm.
Cheetah print.
I'm guessing the
Jean
prosecution
jacket.
didn't tell her to dress as if she was going to church.
That was what she picked. She was in custody and her mom came down there with those clothes for her to testify. And that was what she was doing. She's getting a lot of attention, to say the least, but she came up and turned it on. I didn't know what to expect. She had been in jail for 8-9 days. They had held her. They went over to her house with an arrest warrant and she was just sitting there and they brought her in and they held her because she was a flight risk and we didn't know like what's going to happen really. You never know. There's certain situations, there's family things. And friend, how do you think she did? Like what were your thoughts on it? I mean, I told you like for me, I was like ready to crack my pen in my hand. It was pretty intense because you just don't know which way to go.
Yeah, you could hear a pin drop in the room for sure. I mean, she was our biggest question mark of not sure how she was going to answer because when we reviewed the interview that she did with the police, there was some contradictive information and we didn't know which story she was going to tell, which route she was going to go from there. But she appeared very intelligent, very stuck to her story the whole time. We could see that on direct examination. The state tried to trip her up a couple times and she's like, nope, that's not what I said. This is what I said. And I think that really built her credibility. So then when we cross-examined her, she stuck to that same story, again, basically said, yes, he had access to the car and, drove it day before and after, but never said that he did it. No implication that he was directly involved. So I think her credibility and just her sticking to her story really helped us in that regard. What would you say, Edward? You'd agree with that? Or
yeah, she was the biggest question mark, Chris. Like, you know how that gets before you go to trial. You're sitting there going, we don't really know what she's going to say. Now we know she's been in jail for a week. You're like, the anxiety builds up, but we got lucky. I mean, we were prepared for her. We had clipped all these different statements and she conceded everything. John did a great job in cross with her. He kind of sweet talked her and got her on our side. And she admitted to things that she kind of admitted to with the state and smoothed it over. There's so much at risk. At that point, we kind of neutralized everyone else. And like, if we don't bring this home, Coaxum might not come home, really. And so we really bet all of our chips on this one. And it worked out, but it was nerve-wracking.
I guess I wouldn't call her that based on how she testified, but I tell people I think there's more innocent people in prison because of a snitch than anything else. And snitch has a negative connotation, but a lot of time the snitch is somebody who's lying for their own personal benefit. And that's how innocent people end up in prison.
Right.
Oh, yeah. There's horror stories of that. I think in this one, it was complex with her family dynamics. And Stephen was kind of on the side gig, brought into this. And we were ready for her, to say the least, when it came down to it. And there was a couple other witnesses after that, but we didn't really think at that point we were going to call anybody. We had a couple like loose ends to tie up, which we did. And there were some, exhibits we kind of wanted to touch on. But it was a beautiful courtroom. It's not like the usual one that they have there. They have a like giant old school big screen where they're like, it's coming down and they have the projection screen. This was a little bit smaller, one of those like hybrid courtrooms, but we were able to really set the tone for the closing. John is the ultimate closer. ABC always be closing with John. And he got up there and really let him have it. He hit all the points home. We were able to put some slides up, showing the things I brought up in opening, and he quoted me a little bit. But one of the, I think, take homes from his closing really brought up is that the state's attorney's office, this doesn't mean that they believe that he's guilty, right? Like he's saying, you got to really put it in a perspective of they have a job to do. That doesn't mean that he did this or that they believe that necessarily. They have to present their case just like we have to present our case. And that really, you could see stick home with a lot of people on the jury. You could see people's heads nodding, which you normally don't as much in closing as you do in certain situations. But the state got up after that and just went on about this relationship with Stephen and Latrice. People were just pretty much disengaged at that point, Corinne, right? You said the one
they were
juror
checked out.
Asleep. Yeah, one guy was asleep.
No, people were diligently taking notes when John was up there and yeah, head nodding. And you could see, I mean, that, the facts and the logic doesn't lie versus trying to build on the emotional aspect, which I think was the
Right.
state's viewpoint that they were trying to come through with. And yeah, just berating that was not working to the jury. So
Sounds like desperation.
yeah,
But just bringing the points home, they were good though. They're the supervisors, the seasoned professionals of the area. Like they had a tough case and it was close. We were biting our nails all day the next day, not knowing what to do. I sent Corinne home with John. I go, just get out of here. It's such a long drive back to the city because who knows? Every time that clock ticked.
Isn't that true though?
Yeah.
The most anxiety filled time of a jury trial is once the jury retires to deliberate. Like at that point, it's completely out of your hand as a lawyer. And look, my palms are sweating and everything when I'm waiting on a verdict.
It's hard. Like you seem like a pretty chill guy, man. Like you can't internalize it. It's just unreal. Nothing you can do about it.
How was your client during the deliberation process?
Scared. He started off like, we look good. Or it's just, like, we'll see. You can't tell him anything. You don't want to be the guy that says like, we got this, right? And then you lose. What are you supposed to tell him? What would you tell your client? Like, it's like, we have to wait and see. We put it all out there because we had planned for him to testify if need be. That's really an approach. I know it works. It's dangerous. I think you've talked about on some of your podcasts I watch, like clients going up there and really sinking the ship. But ultimately, like we prepare for it. And that's one of the reasons like we go to so many trials is I tell the client, like, I'm only doing this if you're going to testify. It's really important that like we plan for that. You're the best witness. The jury wants to hear from you. That's how I was taught. It's risky, but so is spending the rest of your life in jail. You want to know you did everything you could, and we can practice. And even the worst witness, if you practice enough, is going to be good. It's like a muscle.
He didn't testify though, right? He didn't
No,
need to.
he chose not
Based
to.
on everything that happened in trial, you guys strategically decided it wasn't necessary.
It's his call. He decided he didn't have to. We prepped him for it. We didn't know what Latrice was going to say, and he was going to. And he told me, he's like, if she doesn't tell the truth, like I'm going to get up there and say what happened. Because he had, he knew what happened and it wasn't him, like there were situations involved in it. So we didn't need to do that, luckily, but we prepped him for it. And that's really what it takes for your legal team. They should be trying to put this witness on. Who's the best witness is the defendant. And you got to do that in these cases and at least be prepared for it because it helps you prepare for the case.
So the moment the verdict is read,
it's just me. Everyone went home. Her and John, they were long gone. I had stayed there. It was around like end of the second day, 4:45. We came in. The judge sent everyone home. Then the second day, it was like right as soon as I ordered lunch, they said they had a verdict, so I didn't get lunch. Had to go over there. It was a full court call. The whole place was full. Nobody was really there. They didn't know they were coming in with the verdict. They just were doing court, and it was me and him, and we got a not guilty. People were clapping. His family was there. It was really a good feeling. He told me he loved me and everybody, so it was great. Really pumped about it. I called them. We were all screaming on the phone. So
instantly screaming, yeah.
there's not many feelings that are better than a not guilty verdict. What I tell people is when a lawyer is able to secure a not guilty verdict, he has essentially saved a life.
No doubt. That's an understatement. He had family. They saved their lives. He's a provider for that whole area. His mom was sick. He had all these girlfriends. They all loved him. I mean, it really would have affected the whole community.
I'm with you, Edward, on the school of thought that clients should testify if you prep them, especially in self-defense cases, but also in cases where, look, this was not me and this is why. Because we all know people have Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. However, essentially everybody that sits on the jury is thinking, if it wasn't me, I would defend myself. I would get up there and say something. And that doesn't always need to happen, but a lot of times it does. And lawyers would do a disservice to their clients if they approach every case with automatically saying, my client's not testifying. That's just not sound.
Also, like, that's no doubt one of the biggest impacts of it. But also, when you talk to your client, you're preparing them, you get to see if they really understand what's going on. And you really understand the evidence. You understand what they're saying. Like, can you explain this to the jury? in your own words. Like, what happened? I've had clients with not a ton of educational background get up there in a suit that didn't fit and point at a TV and they walk because like they got up there and they understood the evidence. They understood where they were, where they weren't. They could show them in the video. It just is invaluable, absolutely invaluable. And it covers you in so many bases with communicating with the client, making sure they understand what's going on. And then it helps the jury understand what's going on.
My law partner and I prep our clients a lot. And I have a classic example. I actually didn't try this case with him. It was a young associate we had at the time tried the case with him. We represented a young man who was accused of murdering his child's mother. And the kid was like 2 years old. She charged at him with a knife and he fired a shot and it struck her and killed her. But during their prep of the guy, he kept saying, he was like, man, you're going to have to come with me to the jail one night and talk to him because he was robotic. She pulled out a knife. She charged at me. I fired in self-defense. And he's like, if he testifies like this in the trial, he's going to prison forever. And I said, all right, I'm going to come to the jail. My law partner and I both went to Jerry Spencer's trial lawyer college. So one of the things they teach you there is psychodrama. So it's Harry, who's my law partner, myself, an associate we had, L'Oreal, and another young lawyer who was just renting office space from us. His name is John. So we're all in this little meeting room in the jail, and there's no breakthrough. They can't get through to him. So I said, hold on, I got it. It just kind of hit me. So I sat directly across from him, Donald, and I said, Donald, I'm your son. I'm not Chris, I'm your son. And I said, Daddy, why did you kill my mama? Why did you kill my mama, Daddy? And the tears just started coming down his face. And what the young lawyer, John, who had never seen that before, he started tearing up as well. But I say that because to simply say, like, we had to find a way to humanize this guy. When he broke down and you know, that was the first time he really was able to just let out that I felt like I had no other chance. Look, the jury didn't let him go, but remember, in Louisiana, he was charged with second-degree murder, which carries life without parole. If he would have got convicted of manslaughter, this judge would have gave him 40. But he was found guilty of negligent homicide, which only carries 5, and he had been in jail the entire time, and it's not a crime of violence. He got out almost immediately.
You saved his life. That psychodrama, I did the trial lawyers college in Montgomery, Alabama a couple years ago, and that stuff is wild. I loved it. It was I haven't had a lot of cases where I've seen it and ran into it. And now you're making me think exactly like of a client of a case I have to do right now to bring that up.
For the right case, it can be a lifesaver. It's not applicable to every factual scenario, but for the right case, it works.
Tool to have in your back pocket.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's just brilliant. Great execution of that and application to really bring that out and walk the guy after they've been holding him. Whew, that's a lot.
That was the full extent of I sat through one day of the trial, but the full extent of my involvement was going to the jail that night, meeting with the client, helping him be able to tell his story to the jury. And look, if he didn't testify, he was going to prison. If he didn't testify, there was no way he was not going.
Yep, you're done. Absolutely. We got a couple cases like that right now. I mean, you just really kind of slapped me into it to be able to connect like that and to show the client what he needs to do. That's been there the whole time, right? It's just that power, that psychodrama is so powerful.
So what did this case teach y'all? I say every case we try teaches us something about either ourselves, the system, life in general. What did this case, let's start with you, Corinne. What did this case teach you?
So to give a little context, this was the first trial that I've done with Edward and this other attorney, John. So this is my first time working with these two attorneys on a trial, and it was a really, really awesome experience. I'm super glad for the experience. They have two totally different lawyering styles. So as the paralegal, it was a little difficult at first to navigate, but I think what I learned was that to just be prepared for whatever they requested, asked, for whatever route they're going to take. Because, you know, in trial, stuff happens, stuff's last minute. You might just totally change course during that time. So I think instead of being in my own head and trying to be a planner and plan for this and plan for that, it's like, you know what, I'm just going to prepare everything, and whatever track and route they're going to take, I'm going to have it ready for them. So it was a learning curve to just sit back, they got it, I'm going to prepare it. If they request something, I'll have it. And yeah, it was awesome. Can't wait for the next opportunity. They were both great, knew what they were doing.
Yeah, I mean, we really hit it off earlier before this trial even came in. And Corinne said, I'm going to be in Chicago actually next couple months till about September or August. And I go, well, perfect timing. I got you want to do this case? We got another one coming up in July. We got this. Let's go, let's go, let's go. There were some negotiations and then we got her there. We were able to get some money from the client for her. She's an absolute asset. It's unbelievable how fast she does everything. The fact that you're hire her full time is upsetting, but she's got her own thing going. So that's like the hardest part, but we're still getting it. Nothing's better than going with a team. The teamwork is what makes it easier on everybody else. Once you know how everyone works, the next one's easier. You're able to concentrate on just really sharpening your tools and taking it to the next level. And we have trials that are really going to need that. This was a great warm up, to kick off the summer, but we have a lot of we have a large cocaine case coming up, a self-defense case. Those are really big. And then we also do cash forfeiture, which is a whole different ball game, a big money cash seizures with these different companies and federal depositions and different things that, pay the bills more or less than these criminal cases. I'm sure you do that, Chris, with these personal injuries. I'm sure these are.
Look, I tell people all the time
that
the criminal cases are the fun cases and the personal injury cases allow me to take care of my family.
It's a different kind of retribution, that you're getting you're restoring justice in one way or another. In both of those, you're really covering your bases from both realms of justice.
That's right. Here's my comparison. I'll tell you guys about two of my kids, and this is the comparison I'll make to law. I have an 18-year-old son who just graduated from high school. He's going to play college football in August. When he was growing up, he wanted to play basketball also. I was like, you suck. We all know this. But if you want to play basketball, I'm going to allow you because you should be able to do more things. My 6-year-old son plays t-ball. He's actually on the all-star t-ball team. He's really good in t-ball. He's really good in basketball. He can dribble with both hands as a 6-year-old, and he can shoot like you wouldn't believe. And he's thin like this. And he wants to play football. And there's so I've been having a debate saying his mom thinks he should focus on baseball. And I was like, no, allowing kids to do multiple things actually allows them to be better in whichever one they ultimately specialize in. And I think the same is true for lawyers. Because I do personal injury and there's a lot of medicine involved, in a lot of my criminal cases, it allows me to be much more informed than somebody who has never done that field. So you, Edward, doing multiple practice areas, you're not pigeonholed. It's not like having chest pains and going to a podiatrist and he says, your chest is fine and so are your feet. And you're kind of like, dude, I got chest pains. And he has to send you to a heart doctor. But because we do more than one thing, or you, Edward, do more than one thing, it actually gives you a competitive edge against those who may only do just criminal defense or only personal injury.
It's a great way for us to get in federal court. It's not so much risk at stake when it's just money. It's not somebody else involved. And that's really, we want to, pick juries on all these cases and just get that realm covered in the civil area where it's just such an unbelievable courthouse to be in federal court and these big money systems. And there's a criminal element to it as well. And that really is what we're running into. We have a lot of different Fourth Amendment issues on these cash seizures. We have a county down out in East St. Louis that these police have been found not credible and they're making up reasons to search your car and take your money. And it's not illegal to have money, and it's like you really have to sit back and relax. That was the first case I gave Corinne, and I go, you're not going to believe this case I have. You're not. It is as juicy as you think. And am I wrong? Have I disappointed so far on that case? It's been wild.
No, it's so interesting. So I'm so appreciative to Edward because, again, I usually do just criminal defense, but he's opened up my entire world into civil forfeitures. And it's the zealousness and passion might be a little too much sometimes. I got to cool that fire, that passion. But
Don't stop.
It's been so interesting and to see from the federal agencies their perspective, potential overreach. I mean, it's a whole nother world, and it's been super awesome to come up with defense theories on these quasi-criminal cases that are forfeitures, because there is an element having that criminal background, seeing what's constitutionally sound and what's not, and bringing that to something as unique as this case. It's been super cool.
And Chris, you get any of those down there, we'll come down there, work them up with you, dude.
Okay,
we'll get some forfeiture cases. We're coming down there. we're going to have a blast. We're going to watch some college football with your kid and get some money back for people.
That's right. I'm ready for that. Look, I really appreciate you guys doing this. This is a Friday evening. It's 7 o'clock in Louisiana. It's 7 o'clock there as well, right?
Oh, it's 7
Yes.
already? Oh, man. I got to meet my wife for dinner. I got to
Same
get
here. I got to do the same. But before we go, I need you guys, if somebody is in need of your services, Edward, I'll start with you. First, let the world know what you do and how they can connect with you.
I'm Edward Johnson. I run Edward Johnson and Associates. You can find us at edwardjohnsonlaw.com, 708-606-4386, 708-606-4386, or email us at info@edwardjohnsonlaw.com.
Corinne?
Yes, my name is Corinne Swintoski. I run Lucid Legal Support, which is a freelance criminal paralegal business. You can find me on my website, lucidlegalsupport.com. I also have a YouTube channel at Lucid Legal Support, and I'm very active on LinkedIn. If you want to get any information on training your legal teams, information for paralegals, solo law firms, feel free to follow me on LinkedIn as well.
I'm going to follow you myself. And
Okay, perfect.
Well, that's where you guys met, right? Didn't you follow her on LinkedIn?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
You guys started
PM'd me,
talking? That's
Chris.
wild.
I did. But so what I do on Sundays is I just hashtag not guilty and I reach out to a ton of people. In full disclosure, I didn't look up your services, but I wrote it down. Do you do work in Louisiana or not really?
I haven't yet, but honestly, I can work in any state. That's the nice thing about being a paralegal, where I don't need a bar license, to work in several states. As long as I can get familiar with the court rules and the state laws and things of that nature, I can hit the ground running. So I'd be happy to, hop down there and find out what Louisiana is all about. You've enticed me with all
The
these
food is
interesting
good too.
policies, and I've been to New Orleans and love New Orleans, but yeah, you've enticed me with all the laws and sentencing guidelines you've talked about during the session.
And I got this tie clip on for you. I got my little
Oh, okay.
French. My French yeah, I got my little, it's the,
Fleur de lis.
yeah, Fleur de Lis. Yeah, just a little bit.
Almost everybody has one like somewhere in their house, on their door.
Right? Yeah, it's great. Fantastic.
Well, I certainly appreciate this. Take care.
All right, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Once again, thanks for joining us on the Iron Gavel. This was really an amazing story of justice. This gentleman was facing a murder case, would have spent the rest of his life in prison, but through the work of Edward Johnson and his team, the man is free. Stay tuned for more powerful real-life stories of justice from courtrooms inside of America. Take care, people.